Hello and welcome to The Green Stream, a podcast brought to you by Sustainable Business Network Detroit, a network of partnerships between Southeast Michigan stakeholders, innovators, and changemakers. Each partner is on a mission to advance and amplify sustainable business practices, and we're here to learn from, share, and help activate a sustainable way forward for Greater Detroit. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review and join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And head over to our website, sbn-detroit.org. Now, let's listen in to our conversation with today's sustainability leaders.
Hello, and welcome to another exciting Green Stream podcast from the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. I'm Neil Hawkins, president of the Erb Family Foundation in Royal Oak. We are a foundation dedicated to environment and arts in Southeast Michigan and water quality of the Great Lakes. And our founders, Fred and Barbara Erb, were the funding sponsors of the Erb Institute for Sustainable Global Enterprise at the University of Michigan more than 25 years ago. And we do fund sustainable business as well. Prior to joining the foundation, I was Chief Sustainability Officer and Corporate Vice President for Environment, Health, and Safety for Dow Chemical in Midland. We have a really terrific interview today. Trevor Lauer, President and Chief Operating Officer of DTE Energy, formerly known as Detroit Edison, to those long-term Michiganders. Welcome, Trevor.
Thanks, Neil. I appreciate you having me. And I also want to say how much we appreciate everything that the Erb Family Foundation does. You guys have a broad reach across Michigan with sustainability issues. So happy to be here today and to do this podcast with you.
Thank you for mentioning that. Okay, well, let's get started. Can you first tell me a little about yourself, where you're from originally, how you got to DTE, and what you do there?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So it's always great to start that way. I grew up a kid in central Pennsylvania. My mother was a nurse. My father worked for the state. He was a fish and game warden. So when I think about sustainability, the thing that strikes me is so much of my childhood grew up in the outdoors. We camped, we fished, we were an outdoors family. I have 4 brothers and a sister. So we were always involved in clean water because of the things that my father did. And we picked up trash as kids early on. Those were the ideals that came into the Lauer family. I went to Penn State. So growing up in central Pennsylvania, if you have the opportunity to go to the Pennsylvania State University, that's like going to the University of Michigan here. It was a big deal. Had the opportunity to go to Penn State and really enjoyed it. And then I got into the energy business, and not necessarily working for utilities. I had done a long stint with Honeywell and then a series of startup businesses that I did with a series of good friends. And then I was recruited to come to DTE Energy back in 2005. And it was my first experience working in the utility space and moved my family to Southeast Michigan. I love Southeast Michigan. I love Michigan, and I love DTE Energy. So I'll probably stop there on the background of me, but it's been a great experience, and my family and I are all in on Michigan.
Cool. Well, we have a really wide audience for these podcasts, all kinds of people. As COO, how would you describe the key role of DTE as a service provider to both citizens and to companies in the region? Can you just give us some feel for what DTE does for those who don't fully understand DTE?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Neil. So thank you. DTE, I'll describe as this way. We have an electric utility, which a lot of people recognize us for, and we serve 2.2 million households and businesses in Southeast Michigan, or about 65% of the population of Michigan is served by our electric utility. And I'll come back and but it's largely offering electricity and electricity-related services to those households and businesses. We also have a natural gas utility called DTE Gas. It's everywhere from the Ann Arbor, Detroit region to the Grand Rapids region up into the Upper Peninsula. And we have about 1.7 million homes and businesses that use our natural gas utility. Both our electric and gas utilities are some of the largest ones in the country. We have another business called DTE Vantage. Our Vantage business operates in 25 different states around the country, and their goal is to help customers with their own sustainability initiatives. So it's everything from working with companies like Ford Motor Company and building out new infrastructure for organizations like that, to operating existing assets and acquiring existing assets from a sustainability and renewable energy perspective. So really cool business that we're really proud of. It's a high growing business that operates around the country. So that's largely the way I think about DTE. Here's the last thing I'll say on your first question, Neil. Our goal and what we talk about at DTE is to be the best in the world and the best for the world. And that really matters because we not only want to operate our business as well, but we want to leave a very positive imprint on the way we operate our businesses. And the communities that host us, we want to make them stronger and more sustainable.
Really cool. When I was at Dow, because we were suppliers to all the manufacturing sectors and consumer products, working with customers to help them on their sustainability actually became a very key part. And my guess is with your utility services, it's the same thing. It's cool you actually have a business to help the customers.
Yeah, well, it's hard to think of a business, Neil, that can impact the success of a state and other businesses like ours. So if you think about electricity, it's normally the number 2 to 3 expense for all of our customers. So we have a huge responsibility at the state and to all the businesses, not only to make sure that we're offering reliable, clean, and low-cost electricity, but how do we support all of the other infrastructure, from creating jobs to creating the right economic development environment within the state. We're one of those businesses that has the ability to really impact the success, and we take that responsibility very seriously at DTE.
Well, that's very exciting. Thank you. So speaking of sustainability, climate change is a really big topic for utilities, probably the biggest topic that you have for long-term strategy. Can you first help us to understand what net zero means to Detroit, to DTE? When you say net zero, what do you mean?
Yeah, so I'm going to take it up a level and let's talk about what net zero means overall. It's generally accepted that the timeline when people talk net zero is against a 2005 baseline. So internationally, people use a 2005 baseline. So it's how much carbon did you produce, because carbon dioxide is what goes into the atmosphere that causes climate change. So if you're going to fight climate change, how much do you want to lower that carbon dioxide level relative to your 2005 levels? So at DTE, what we talk about is our electric utility. We want it to be net zero by 2050, meaning we've removed 100% of the carbon dioxide. There's 2 ways you can do that from that 2005 baseline. One is you change your operations, which gets you most of the way there. And with most businesses, it's really the last 10% of that net zero on what's the technology that's going to get there. And there's things like carbon offsets that we can spend some time talking about. So how much can you reduce it? And then what are the other activities you can do, Neil, that cause you to get to that net zero point? So a simple way that I'd want your listeners and all of everybody watching this to think about it is DTE started at a baseline. Let's call it 40 million tons of carbon dioxide. My goal in 2050 is have that at 0. That's what I mean by net zero.
All right. Well, you folks have actually spoken a lot about this, and you've made pledges. So let's go there next. So I've got kind of a long question, but I'm sure it's a complicated answer. So you have a journey to net zero that the company is on. As stated on your website, the net zero plan will reduce carbon emissions by 6 metric tons per year, which is the equivalent of taking 1.3 million cars off the road. Very impressive amount. Further, DTE states that its utility operations will reduce carbon dioxide and methane emissions by more than 80% by 2040 to produce cleaner energy. So, what will this actually look like in Michigan? What will it take in Michigan to achieve these numbers? So, over the next 18 years or so, what will your mix look like to us, people living here?
So that's a great question, Neil. So I'm going to start with the DTE Electric one, and I'll describe how we do it electric. And then methane emissions is DTE gas. I'm going to come back and let you ask me another question about gas, because the first one's pretty complicated along with the second one. So to keep it into manageable bites. So DTE Electric, how do we do it? Well, the first thing we do is we continue to build renewable energy. DTE is the largest producer of renewable energy inside of the state of Michigan by quite a large margin. We're going to continue to build solar arrays and wind facilities that produce electricity. So carbon is largely created by how you create electricity. And a lot of that came from our old coal-fired power plants. So as we now have we have 33 solar farms and we have 17 wind parks. The more of our generation that comes from renewable energy, that renewable energy doesn't produce any carbon. Another big generation resource we have that produces no carbon is our Fermi 2 nuclear plant down in Frenchtown, Michigan. So it's another great asset that produces a lot of carbon-free energy for our customers. So how do we get there in 2040 and 2050 for the electric company? We do a couple things. We continue to retire coal-fired power plants. So this year we will retire our Trenton Channel coal-fired power plant. We'll retire our St. Clair coal-fired power plant. Neither of those are operating anymore. We stopped operating them at the end of May. That only leaves us with two coal-fired power plants left in our system. That's our Bell River plant and our Monroe plant. So since 2005, we retired a lot of coal-fired assets. So the number one thing we do is we keep retiring those plants. Number two, we keep building more solar and we keep building more wind. The number three thing we do is we use our energy waste reduction programs. So we help customers reduce the amount of energy that they use every year on our system. The less energy they use, the less we produce, the less carbon that goes into the atmosphere, right? So helping them reduce their overall usage, another great way we do it. That'll get us in 2040 to about 80% or 82% carbon reduction. So I have a really clear path through retirements and through building renewables on how to get to about 82% carbon reduction. The question really gets down to that last 18% or 15%. We'll work our way through the numbers. You've got to be out of the natural gas business essentially right now. And gas is one of those resources that we believe is really important as we go on this carbon reduction journey. It's 75% cleaner than coal when it comes to carbon emissions, Neil. So I continue to use natural gas because when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, our customers still expect power. So easing our way off of gas into those later years, and then looking at three additional technologies, and I'll explain these, and then I'll take a breath. What happens with nuclear power? Do we start to get a resurgence in small modular nuclear reactors? The second one is carbon sequestration and storage. So can you strip carbon dioxide out of a natural gas power plant? You liquefy it and then you sequester it in the ground. It happens today on a pretty regular basis. And then the third is, what's the use of hydrogen? Can you break natural gas apart into the different molecules and create hydrogen and use hydrogen as a clean fuel source instead of natural gas? So those are the three leading candidates today to take care of that last piece of carbon emissions based on the technology that we have today. So that's the way we march it. We retire, we build more renewables, and then we wait for technology to continue to develop.
Well, your answer caused me to think of a question or two. First off, do you have much investment in gas plants currently? I'm saying for electrical production. And are you
Yeah.
going to build new gas during this transition?
So we just opened a new natural gas plant this year in St. Clair County called our Blue Water Energy Center. And we retired 3 coal plants and we opened a gas plant. And that gas plant is the most efficient natural gas plant and the cleanest burning natural gas plant in the United States. And it reduced our carbon emissions by 75% over the plants that it replaced. So we talk about how do we change and reduce carbon. Well, a really big initiative was getting the Blue Water Energy Center up and running. We have also a series of what we call gas peaking plants, Neil. So these are ones when on the hottest day, these plants turn on and we use them to produce power and capacity for our customers.
Yeah, at my former employer, we had some of those during my career. Let me ask you this. What is your assumption on how long Fermi 2 can keep running? Is it 10 years? Is it 30 years? Because it's been around it. And for full disclosure, I studied nuclear engineering in college, and I'm aware of that plant and have worked in nuclear plants.
All right. Well, my nuclear background is not nearly as deep as yours, but I have oversight for our nuclear power plant. And we currently have a license to operate it till 2045. So that would be a 60-year life. Many plants are now starting to get licensed for an additional 20 years past that. So I would envision us operating Fermi safely and with low carbon emissions until 2065. We'll have to continue to invest in the plant, but I'm a big fan of nuclear power. It's there when you need it. It runs 99.9% of the time. There's some things that we could talk about with nuclear power that people are worried about, but I am a big fan of nuclear power. And as a country, if we want to be carbon sustainable and net zero, nuclear power has to play a really important role, I believe, in how we get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think especially these new modular nuclear units, it's so different than what the nuclear technology was 30, 40 years ago, which is probably what Fermi 2, that's about the vintage. The other thing about modular nuclear is it can also help in the hydrogen economy.
Yes.
There are ways to generate hydrogen out of those plants that I know my former employers has publicly said they're looking into integration of modular nuclear, perhaps with chemical plants because of the hydrogen and the need for the steam, the energy, the waste steam.
Yeah, well, everything you're touching on, there's different studies out there, but it's hard for me to envision how the US or how the world does this without nuclear power playing a role. That's going to be different state or country by country, and really state by state on how people view nuclear energy. It is a very safe technology. We are blessed to have an outstanding team down at our Fermi 2 plant. It came online in 1985, and we've just got a great team down at Fermi running that plant.
Yeah, I appreciate the focus there. Let's turn to that last 20%. So let's say we get to 2040 and you've done the 80%. Kind of explore a little bit further how the mix that will get you to net zero by 2050.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I want to start by saying it this way. I don't know what technology is going to become available in the next 20 years, right? When we first started in renewables back in 2008, we brought on our first wind farm, and it was 18 cents a kilowatt hour or $180 a megawatt hour. Today, we're doing it for 5 cents a kilowatt hour or $50 a megawatt hour, so a third of the cost. Well, people were pressing DTE and the other utilities around the country early back in 2008, 2009, 2010. You got to go faster. You got to build faster. You got to move faster. We do need to continue to keep pace. But when you look at the cost curves on how renewables have changed and come down in cost dramatically, I believe new technology will show up, Neil, that'll allow us to go after this last 20%. And part of what we have to do as a company, as a state, and as a nation is be patient to let that technology show up. Because one of the things that I always think about is there's a customer at the end of every one of these decisions. There's somebody paying a bill. And a lot of our customers today would like their bills to be lower. I want to make sure when we make these long-term decisions, because these assets aren't 5-year assets. These are 40-year, 60-year assets that we build. We need to make smart decisions that work for our end-use industrial, commercial, and residential customers. That's going to be really important. So that's the way I'd start to answer your question. When I get to 2040, I'll be at somewhere between 80 and 85% carbon reduction. At that point, I believe we're going to have clarity into a couple things. One is growth of carbon emissions from transportation. So if you think about an overall economy net zero, you've got really 3 big sectors where you've got to abate carbon emissions. The electric utility sector, which is the second largest emitter of carbon. The transportation sector, which is the largest emitter of carbon. And then the third is what I'll call agricultural and just residential use, which is probably the hardest to abate. If you look at our big 3 auto companies in Michigan, Stellantis, Ford, and GM, they're all moving towards an electrified future. In order for them to abate their carbon emissions, which are about 30 to 31% of the carbon emitted in the US, they want clean fuel from DTE Energy, as an example. So my electricity has to be 0 carbon so that they can abate their carbon. So I get to 2040, I'm at 85%. How do I get to that last 15%? Well, today, the cost curve for that last 15% looks like this, right? It goes horizontal for that last 15%. For your listeners means it's really, really expensive. I believe some technology change will happen in the next 15 years that'll allow us to abate that last 15%. And we need to be able to study that. Is it hydrogen? Is it carbon sequestration and storage? Is it small modular nuclears? Does something happen with battery technology where instead of a 4-hour lithium ion battery storage, we now have 30-day battery storage? Because that's what we need. We don't need just 4-hour storage on the electric grid. I need to be able to store power for 30 days. Well, that doesn't exist today inside of the technology we know. So that's the way I think about this last 15%.
Very good. Well, thank you for that explanation. It's very helpful. Let's turn to a couple of different areas. Communications, external communications and internal with your employees. Is on these areas of sustainability, climate, strategy, et cetera, is that communication the same internally and externally? And is it hard to maneuver and communicate with a company the size of DTE?
Yeah, well, first I'd say it's such a great opportunity, internal and external, for an organization like DTE. We probably spend 80% of our management time and our board of directors time talking about sustainability, climate change, and what we can do to step up and be a force for good and to recognize our responsibility to help fight climate change. Look, at DTE, we believe in climate change, and we know we have a role to make sure that we do everything we can to arrest climate change and to jump in and to try to help. So when I think first about employees, so Neil, your question is spot on. We are going through a fundamental change on how we generate electricity. And that can be really hard for a series of our employees. As we continue to shut down assets, retire assets that are pretty old, and bring on new assets, there's been a cultural change within how we talk to our employees, how we talk to our unions, and all of our stakeholders. Some of these communities, actually, I'll take back what I just said, probably like your old employer, where I have a facility, those are some of the best funded communities and counties inside of the state of Michigan. DTE is the single largest taxpayer inside of the state of Michigan. So where I have a big power plant, The taxes are great. Everybody loves the facilities. There's a lot of other ancillary businesses. Was I transition out of that, that's not only been hard for my employees, but it's been hard for a series of the communities that have hosted these assets for a long period of time. I need to continue to articulate the burning platform to our employees. The vast majority of them absolutely believe in climate change. They absolutely understand sustainability and where we're going. But we need that's the challenge for our leadership at DTE, is to continue to articulate that viewpoint and talk about why it's so important. And we do that a lot inside of DTE. And then communicating with our customers externally. The first thing our customers want at DTE is to make sure that when they hit the light switch, the power comes on, right? They want to know that we're reliable first and foremost. And in all of our surveys, that's the number one thing they talk about. Same in our natural gas business. When you need natural gas flowing to heat your home, you want to make sure that it's there. But more and more of our customers are now asking us around sustainability and what are we doing to answer that question. Well, that's a great platform for us to pivot to talk about how we help customers reduce their energy, how we build renewable energy facilities, how we help with solar. All of those are great opportunities for us to tie closer to what our customers really want right now. And that's to know that a business like DTE not only wants to be, I'll go back to what I said, the best in the world, but this best for the world around sustainability. That's a huge platform for us to talk to our customers about.
Yeah, and those kind of communications with communities and labor and other constituencies is also all about listening and listening well. And it sounds like you're approaching your communities that way and your customers.
Yeah, that's thank you, Neil. So one of the things that's different is we need to be a company that listens to all the stakeholders. I do have the responsibility to make sure that the lights stay on and we do this in a sustainable way, but there's a lot of great organizations out there that have an idea on how to do that. I'll give you a great example. Last week, I had an opportunity to sit down with the Sierra Club, and I spoke to the Sierra Club about the ideas they have on how we do this. And while we may not hold hands and walk down the street together and agree on 100% of everything, we agree on 95% of the things we need to do going forward. We need to make sure as a company, we're listening to our customers, we're listening to all the communities, we're hearing what they want to tell us, and then we're pivoting on our approaches, because there's a lot of really smart people involved in sustainability and climate change right now.
Mm-hmm. Let me turn to a little different dimension of sustainability, and it's this area of nature. And DTE has had a long history, I would say, of leadership in conservation and conservation practices. Can you comment about your approach to nature, because you have these big facilities, you're on water, et cetera? And can you comment about your activities with tree planting in the Detroit area?
Yeah, thank you. So wildlife habitat facilities have been really important to us. So if you take any of our major generation facilities, they tend to not be 20 acres, they tend to be hundreds of acres. Well, all of those are wildlife habitat certified facilities. We take pride in the amount of wildlife and the habitat that is there, and we spend a lot of time. And it's little things like bees in the D, which got a lot of advertisement recently. Well, that's our O'Shea Solar Park in the city, and we're working with an organization that wants to have 20 million bees, 20,000 bees. I apologize, I should know whether it's thousands or millions.
A lot of bees.
It's a lot of bees. 20 million sounds too many. But we work in a lot of organizations. We have gardens where we grow food, and we distribute food inside of the state that are in our facilities. So this idea of sustainability of our organizations, wildlife habitat, hugely important. Then we also partner with a series of different organizations like the Department of Natural Resources here in the state of Michigan, Relief Michigan. In the last 20 years, we've planted over 20 million trees as part of DTE. Now, I don't plant them underneath our power wires because that's the number one cause of outages. But we understand the role that we have in planting trees. carbon dioxide is absorbed by trees. So we fundamentally believe that planting trees to also help with carbon dioxide is a really important piece. So they beautify the cities, they beautify local parks, they clean the air, they enhance natural habitats. Our role with Relief Michigan in the state is something we're really proud of.
So you mentioned your board earlier, you mentioned management time. Can you comment on whether or not trends in ESG amongst investors has had much impact on DTE?
Yeah, well, I'll start with it's had a huge impact on DTE, right? We're going to chart our path with what's right, but I know Jerry Norcia, who's our CEO, and his board of directors push us very hard on ESG, and each of the three sectors of ESG we spend a lot of time for. And I think about ESG in our best for the world, right? So from a sustainability standpoint, Neil, we've talked a lot about that. In ESG related funds, which tend to own stock in a company like DTE, we have 200 million shares of stock, and institutional investors will own big chunks of our company. And they look for us to be sustainable, to have great corporate governance, which is the G side of it. So there's specific things that they look for in terms of corporate governance and how we do that. And then also employees, how do we think about the employee side of it? So the ESG is really important. We have scorecards at DTE that we look at on a regular basis that measure each of those three pieces. When I talk to investors, it's a common question around ESG and how we do it. And then we're rated by a whole series of different outside organizations. And I will tell you, DTE gets really good ratings on ESG, and that's something we're very proud of.
Yeah, I do think it's a significant trend. I know you have to deal with regulation, you have to deal with consumers and companies, but the investor trend is, in my view, will be long lasting. So I'm glad to hear that you're ahead of that and really working at it carefully and thoughtfully. Let me ask you this. We're going to close out in a minute or two on a few more personal leadership questions, but let me ask you about Detroit. We got a pretty good picture here of what you're thinking DTE will look like in 2050. From a sustainability perspective, what's your view of where the Detroit area and Michigan, where do you think it will be in 2050?
Right. That's a great question, Neil. So it's hard to picture a state that's more beautiful than Michigan. Trees, up north, southeast Michigan, parks, Belle Isle, right? We can go on and talk about the water and the beauty of the state. A company like DTE's job has to be to integrate in with the rest of the state and all of our communities to enhance that sustainability, enhance the beauty of our state. And whether that's planting trees, or whether that's working on how we site new solar arrays and wind farms as part of the natural evolution, it's how we handle our distribution system and whether we have wires overhead or underground, how we trim trees to improve reliability. All of that is going to be really important as we go forward towards 2040. And you mentioned this earlier, we just need to listen to the stakeholders and work really closely with our stakeholders to achieve their goals and objectives and our goals and objectives. And if we listen, then we can do that collaboratively with them. And with specific to the city of Detroit, I think it's even deeper for a company like DTE. Look, we've been headquartered in Detroit forever. And when the economic crisis hit, we were not one of the companies that thought about leaving the city or jumping out. In fact, we doubled down to try to help the city. And we'll continue to try to help the city of Detroit. There's not a higher goal that we can have is to serve all of our customers with dignity, right? And that's easy when you're serving Ann Arbor or Bloomfield Hills or the Grosse Points, right? Because those are customers that, while they may have an issue here with DTE on and off, They can afford their bills. They understand what they're doing. When we get into our low income customers and the customers that struggle the most, that's where an organization with a heart really needs to step up to try to do as much as we can, not only to help those customers have a sustainable future, like what's green look like? How do we plant trees? How do we make sure that renewable energy is just as important as to the city of Detroit as it is to a community like Ann Arbor? I think that's where the heart of DTE really needs to show up when we talk about sustainability. How do we work closely with the mayor and his office to make sure that the initiatives that he wants to do and that the city wants to do are also initiatives that we can align with and support? So I think it's where we go to this best for the world for DTE, and how do we show our heart to our 2.2 million residential homes and businesses and our 1.7 million on the gas side. That's where we need to show up really strongly. 10,000 employees strong, understanding our role in sustainability, and then as a corporation support those 10,000 employees to volunteer in the community, to serve on boards in the community, to help influence great public policy across the state. That's how we get it done.
It sounds like your employees are quite motivated around sustainable development, the triple bottom line, community, environment, and economic development. Can you just comment about the 10,000 employees of DTE and how they approach this? Are they motivated? Are you giving them a lot of opportunity to become involved and to lead?
Yeah. Well, the easy thing I'll say is the 10,000 employees at DTE inspire me. It's so easy to look at the work that our employees do and to be inspired by it. It's the smallest acts that make such a difference. And I can talk about our environmental team, our environmental management team, and the work that I watch them do in whether it's River Rouge or the city of Detroit, and whether it's working with Relief Michigan or trying to work on a related water issue. Then we have volunteerism. You know, we were one of the 50 companies that were recognized by the Points of Light as one of the top 50 civic companies in the country for 2 years straight now because of the level of volunteerism. Over 50% of our employees donate at least 8 hours a year into volunteering. And that's something we push very strongly at DTE because we want our employees to be attached to the communities that they live and serve in. That's how we'll be better for our customers. And then lastly, I'll just say, think about businesses like your previous employer in DTE Energy to attract the next generation of great leaders and great employees. Well, I think about my 19-year-old and my 22-year-old boys, Neil. They want to stand for something more than I want a paycheck. They care about the environment. They care about social issues. Mm-hmm. We need to align with these new employees coming into the organization and show them what we stand for as an organization, because that's going to make a difference on how you attract and retain those employees into your organization going forward. I won't speak for you, but I'm an old guy. Well, the first person that was willing to actually pay me, I was like, wow, I'm going to get a paycheck coming out of college. That's great. I'll go to work there. Well, that's not the way people think about it today. They want to know mission. Mm-hmm. They want quality of life. They want to know that their organization's aligned with the mission that they care about. Well, that's what we want to do at DTE. We want to be aligned with our employees. So I think that's swell. I see it in our newest employees. The way they come in and the ideas they bring, it's just inspirational to me as a leader to watch our employees and the way they want to lead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very consistent with my prior experience. And I actually wrote a short paper on the 5 value propositions for sustainability for a company. And one of the 5 was attract and retain top talent. But it's not just attract and retain, it's attract, retain, and develop top talent, because you can really accelerate leadership development through having employees working in the community, volunteering on boards, etc. It really goes hand in hand. Sustainability provides opportunities for employees to really advance their careers, but also advance their personal missions.
Yeah. Well, what we talk about, Neil, is employee engagement. So we're really proud at DTE. There's an organization called the Gallup organization that looks at employee engagement worldwide. And we are now 11 years as a Gallup Great Workplace, meaning you score in the top 10% of all organizations worldwide. We're the only utility or energy company to ever achieve that, and to achieve it 11 years. The secret sauce for us is our employees, right? And if we can get our employees focused on doing great for each other, then they'll do great for the customers. And a lot of that secret sauce is exactly what you're talking about, right? Is how do I engage them as part of this mission? And it's got to be more than just the work that we give them. They want to volunteer. They want to be part of something that's bigger than just producing electricity or natural gas or other related services. They want to be part of the fabric of these communities that make a difference. Well, that's where you get the discretionary energy of an employee. That's where they give you more than they would otherwise give you, because they're invested in the business. They care about DTE. They're proud to say, like, I started this by saying how proud I am to be a DTE employee. Well, I think we have 10,000 employees that would tell you just how proud they are to say that they work for this company.
That makes a really big difference, really big difference. Okay, here's our last question. What advice would you give to a young person today who's interested in getting into the private sector, into a role that helps impact sustainability, but is a private sector role? So if you got that call today from someone, what would you advise them to do?
First would be follow your passion. There's a lot of places where you can affect sustainability and be successful in the private sector, but we all have to be passionate about it, because that passion is what drives that discretionary energy, and it's what attaches us to our business. So I'd say be selective, like talk to a lot of different organizations. And Neil, I get the benefit of doing this because I have a son that's a college senior and another one that's going to be a college sophomore. And we have these discussions around how do you jump in and where does that passion come from and how do you find success? So I think passion really, really matters. The second is there a match between what the company wants to do and what you want to do? The days of people just taking their first job because somebody was willing to pay them, like Trevor did, I don't think that's what you do today. If you're passionate about sustainability and changing the world and helping fight climate change, you need to make sure you're signing up with an organization that has the same ideals and the same thing that you want to do. And there's a lot of great organizations out there that do that. There's some that aren't there yet, but I think eventually all of the organizations will get there. So does the organization's mission match your mission? If you can find those two things collectively, then boy, you've hit the bonanza, right? And then the proof, the third piece I'd say is, well, then the proof is in the work that you're actually doing. If you show up in that job, an organization should be able to energize you fairly quickly about what the mission is that they're trying to do and how your mission ties to that. Now, I will tell you, it's funny at DTE because I have a lot of young employees that I speak with, and they want to move a lot faster. Like, I want to do this, I want to do that. Like, why can't I do this right off the bat? Sometimes I tell employees you have to be just a little patient, because organizations also, there's a rhythm to an organization to get a big organization like yours or mine to move. It takes a while to get a big organization to move. Doesn't mean they won't move, but we also have to exercise just a little bit of patience. But that impatience that young people or younger employees bring, that also pushes the old guys like me to move faster and help the organization move. So find your passion, find an organization that has that same alignment, and then keep your passion and push that organization faster. That's the three pieces of advice I'd give a young person trying to think about jumping in the private sector.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that from my experience is they have to be good at their whatever their current job is. They need to keep focusing on whatever that is, but within that also explore how they can increase their impact, because a company like DTE is willing to let them explore, but as long as they're also doing their current job, and then they can move through a series of jobs and build that experience so they can have an incredible career and have a lot of sustainability impact at the same time.
Yeah, I'm going to borrow that one. I'll shamelessly plagiarize that one next time I get asked that question, Neil, with you. But yeah, obviously we need employees to be great at what they do and to deliver for each other and deliver for customers. But that passion is so important on what you bring to work. If you love your work, you love the company you're working for, like we do at DTE, it's really easy to bring that discretionary energy and that passion to do it. But that's also, it's a challenge of leadership, right? I'm a big fan of super leadership. Leadership has the ability to make a big change in the way employees and leaders think about it. I use Jerry Norcia and Jerry Anderson, who was our retired CEO. What just two great leaders who have impacted the way we think about leadership so much at DTE. Different styles, but man, are they terrific leaders, and they bring that passion of their leadership and it cascades down through the organization. We talk about shadow of the leader. Well, when your leader sets that right shadow, it's easy to follow their traits and their behaviors because you see what great looks like. Well, that's a challenge for all of us to continue to make sure that we're shadowing those right leadership behaviors, because the newest employees take their leads off of the person that they work directly with, right? Trevor can talk about all the things he wants to at the electric company, but I'm going to take my lead off of that next level manager. And if I'm watching her or him do all of the right things, then I'm going to follow that.
Well, really, really thank you so much for joining us today, Trevor. This has been a great session. You really shared your time, your insights, and all the great stuff you're doing at DTE, both for your customers and for the region, for your employees. We really appreciate your sharing all that today. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Neil. Appreciate it. And I'll go back to the Erb Family Foundation. Thank you for everything that you're doing across the region and the state to make a difference and to partner with companies like DTE. Happy to talk today and talk about the wonderful things that our organization is doing.
Well, thank you so much. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sustainable Business Network Detroit, the Green Stream Podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on SBN-Detroit.org and stay tuned for more conversations on sustainability from inside and around the city.